On November 4th, 1979, Iranian students attacked the American embassy in Iran. The students were infuriated with the United States for repeated interference in their government. They scaled the embassy walls and captured 52 hostages. The students imprisoned the hostages in Iran for 444 days. This would come to be known as the Iranian hostage crisis. Much of the blame for the crisis is placed on Iran. However, America played a key part as well. American politics interfered and left Iranian people with no hope for the future. The struggle left them desperate, and when the Ayatollah, an Islamic leader, offered them a savior, they readily agreed. Had America left them alone, there would have been no crisis, and they would currently be a strong and powerful ally. Terror in Tehran, the spark that lit a nation. At the end of World War II, Britain invaded Iran and seized control over the oil rights. Britain was poor and weak after the war, and the abundant Iranian oil would provide them with resources and income. Britain signed a treaty with the Shah, Iran's king, which granted Britain oil rights and allowed for military presence throughout Iran. This treaty lasted for several years, but was eventually overruled as the Iranian parliament gained more power and more influence. The parliament overthrew the Shah and removed him from office as they moved closer to a democratic government. In 1951, Mohammad Mossadegh became Prime Minister of Iran and was ready to implement his plan to become fully democratic. America and Britain were concerned with the shifting government, as communism became increasingly popular and a new government would threaten the oil supply. The American government worked with British intelligence to devise a military coup, Operation Ajax. In 1953, the CIA and British intelligence invaded Tehran, Iran's capital city, and captured Mossadegh and several other government officials. They then turned Mossadegh over to his political opposition, and he was sentenced to death. But the Shah intervened, and Mossadegh was sentenced to 3 years of solitary confinement instead, where he later died. The Shah was reinstalled as the monarch of Iran by the American government, and he allowed America and Britain to again take control of Iran's oils. Many of Iran's middle and lower-class citizens were angry that the wealth of their nation was now flowing to the United States and Britain. Many Iranians protested the Shah's reinstatement and held demonstrations in the streets. They protested the Savak, the Shah's brutal military police, and the growing oppression and poverty that was sweeping the nation. Over the course of many years, these protests continued. Meanwhile, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, who was a popular Islamic religious leader, exiled for 14 years because he spoke out against the Shah and his policies, found more sympathizers. He sent tapes, sermons, and accusations into Tehran and turned the people against the Shah. The increasing danger posed by the demonstrations and protests made Tehran no longer safe for the Shah and his family. On January 16, 1979, the Shah fled with his family to Egypt. With the Shah gone, the Ayatollah was free to return to Tehran and to continue to fuel the revolution. The Ayatollah was anti-American, and when he returned, he was given a hero's welcome. There were celebrations in the streets, and he gave many political and religious speeches throughout Iran. A group of students who were part of the Muslim Students of Imam Khomeini line were eager for the Ayatollah's return. They were devout followers of the Ayatollah and grew angrier with the Shah and the United States as the Ayatollah spoke about the awful crimes that America had committed against their country. On February 1, 1979, these students voiced their anger through violence. They ascended the walls of the American embassy and tried to capture it. They proved unsuccessful, but the action was enough to catch America off guard. The security was improved, and the staff of the embassy was drastically reduced. Several months passed, and the revolution continued to grow. The Iranian government had fallen apart with the Shah's departure, and a new government was enacted, a revolutionary council. It was led by the Ayatollah himself. Huge masses in Tehran gathered at or near the American embassy to protest and demonstrate each day. Meanwhile, the Shah traveled from country to country. He was trying to find treatment for his recently diagnosed cancer. He finally returned to the United States. Jimmy Carter, the American president, did not want to let him in, but after much contemplation and persuasion, Carter agreed. The Shah arrived in the U.S. on October 22, 1979. When the Iranian government discovered this, they used it to fuel the revolution even further. With this knowledge, the same students who had attacked the embassy earlier that year revolted again. On November 4, 1979, the students successfully forced their way into the American embassy, and 63 hostages were taken. The students then shackled the embassy staff and searched the premises. They looked for incriminating evidence against America. They found many shredded documents and many waiting to be shredded. Some students were then tasked with piecing these documents together so the information could be used against America in their Islamic courts. The hostages were interrogated and imprisoned. The students had originally planned to hold the embassy for a week and show the American government and the world that the revolution would prevail and not tolerate any more interference from the West. However, the Ayatollah voiced his support for the students and placed them in charge of the capture of the entire embassy. 13 hostages were released shortly after the capture, including African Americans, women, and several foreign diplomats only visiting the embassy. They were sent home by order of the Ayatollah, reasoning that they had already suffered by the hand of American society and did not deserve imprisonment. Another hostage was later sent home because of illness. The total was down to 52, and they would remain in Iran for 444 days.
The United States is an imperialist power, and it's one of the characteristics of an imperialist power to plant spy dens and spy networks all over a country to control all its major political, social, economical systems, and to control these systems for its own benefits. So they work for its own profits. They exploited our natural resources. They exploited our oil.
But are you really saying that the people that you have taken prisoner, that you're holding in this building, are responsible for that in a way?
No, we don't say that the people directly. The system, the United States imperialist system is responsible for this. The hostages here, okay, they were just people handling the thing. We don't say that these hostages are innocent. No, they were the people through which these crimes, many of them, have been done. And yet, the Shah turned this country into a ruin. And of course, do the American people, do the Western people know this? No.
During this time, tension was high and any chance at compromise seemed improbable. Several negotiated treaties were suddenly canceled, Iranian assets in American banks were frozen, and hatred steadily grew between the two countries. The Iranian people demanded that the Shah be returned to Iran to face trial and punishment for his crimes against them. America refused, insisting that they could reach a compromise. Their proposal was simple: return the hostages and American influence would recede from Iranian soil. The Iranian government would not accept the deal without the Shah, and conflict continued to grow. Only weeks after the embassy was taken, the Shah left America for Panama. Jimmy Carter had written to the president of Panama and arranged for the Shah to stay there, hoping to place Iran's anger elsewhere. This was a mistake. They lost what little bargaining power they had, and Iran was furious. The Iranian government planned the capture of the Shah and was in the process of capturing him when he flew to Egypt, where he then died. The Iranians were furious and continued to grow angrier. A month after the Shah died, on April 25, 1980, American forces prepared for a rescue mission. It was named Operation Eagle Claw. The mission would require helicopters launching from a desert close to Tehran. The mission began and ended in failure as a desert storm destroyed several helicopters and killed 8 men. With no way to rescue the hostages, nothing changed. The hostages were still in Iran, the Ayatollah refused to compromise, and the Iranian people were calling for American blood. Without the Shah, Iran wouldn't budge, and it stayed that way for many months until on September 12, 1980, when the Ayatollah was finally willing to compromise. He said that they would give up the hostages if the American government's influence in Iran would diminish permanently, Iranian assets in American banks were unfrozen, and most importantly, they would return the Shah's money and property to Iran. America readily agreed, and on January 20, 1981, the hostages were flown out of Iran and back to America. The compromise made with Iran did not last. After the hostages were returned, American influence was still present through partnerships with other nations, but it was notably reduced. However, the embassy was and still is empty. Iran changed from an almost prosperous democratic state to a radical Islamic nation. The women who were close to having jobs and rights were then forced to hide themselves behind hijabs, headscarves. Religion took over Iran, and whatever was left of their democratic hopes lay shattered, sliced by the sword of American politics. Even today, Iran and the United States are in conflict. The embassy remains closed, and there is little hope of compromise for the future. Many Iranians wish for America to return to help build their economy. There are also many women who wish for more rights. On March 8, 2018, many Iranian women from all classes joined together and protested the hijab. The two countries might yet have opportunities to compromise, learn from past mistakes, and to finally end the conflict, which has lasted for more than 60 years.